I've been coaching agile teams. Actually, I've been working on agile teams since about 2000. First one, I was a tester on an agile team. Can you still hear me okay now? Yes. All right, I'm not getting the feedback anymore. So I was a tester on an agile team, and I realized how much more fun it was to be testing on an agile team than it was to be testing on a, I'll call it traditional, but waterfall kind of team. I see a lot of you folks are really, there's a lot of young people here. So I'm guessing that some of you have never experienced testing on an agile or on a waterfall team or been on. Is there anybody who's tested or who's a tester and not have any idea what it means to be on a waterfall project? Anybody here? No? No one. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting the differences between even 15 years ago and now and what's happened. So let's kind of just get into this a little bit. I'm trying to stand because they're videoing this, and so there's this really bright light behind me, and so I'm just kind of trying to stand still, and it's not going to work because I don't stand still very well. All right. So let's just kind of go backwards a minute. I want to ask a question for you guys. How many would consider themselves testers in this room? Your main job is testing. Be great. Yeah, great number. Excellent. How many programmers in the room? All right. How many people who are manager kind of people? Okay. So a nice variety of different roles. Glad to see. Is everybody on agile teams here? Everybody? Everybody? Yeah, good. Good. Okay. So I find that I keep hearing over and over and over again, and it doesn't matter where I go, what book I read, that we need to have testers who should be able to write code. Quite a few years ago, probably about 3 years ago, Elizabeth Hendrickson, if you've never heard of her, she's written Explore It. She wrote a blog post and did some research. And the link is at the end of this show, but she showed how many ads for testers that said, must code. And so I've been looking at this and I've been thinking about it, and we hear it over and over and over again, and yet I find that a lot of testers, they go, well, I can't code, I guess I can never be on an agile team, right? We look at it and we go, so, because some VP reads that book, reads those ads, and says, I guess we better make sure that we hire SDETs. SDETs, software developer and test. I think Microsoft kind of coined that term, right? So they hire these software developers out of university and say, okay, now you're going to test and do all the automation. But they haven't a clue how to test, right? And so you get this going back and forth, and I think that we're doing our teams a disservice, right? Because what we're trying to do with Agile is build quality into our products. We are trying to build better products than we used to do. And I'm not sure we're doing that by hiring SDETs and making sure every tester needs to know how to code. I'm not sure we do, right? So in the land of, I call it unicorns, because fantasy, so my company name is Dragonfire. I kind of like fantasy. It's kind of one of my things, right? But in the world of unicorns, I would say that testers need skills like exploratory testing, much more important than coding, right? Having competency, which means I have testing skills, right? I'll talk a little bit more about what that might mean. Testing skills, competency, trumps having a role, my name is tester. If you have testing skills, that's more important, right? Thinking that the whole team, and when I talk about the whole team, I talk about the delivery team, right? the testers, the programmers, the product owners, everybody who's responsible for delivering a piece of software or product. If everybody thinks that coding, or not that coding, that quality is a responsibility, right? Is that in the land of fantasy? I think it is, right? Maybe. Testing is a activity that happens throughout. It's not a phase at the end. So we started right at the very beginning of whatever we're trying to do. We're testing all the way along. It's not an afterthought, right? And the last one is, if I said zombie testers, do you know what I mean by zombie testers? They're those testers that sit and read the test script and do exactly what that test script says and go pass, fail. There's no thinking involved, right? In my fantasy world, they don't exist. Zombies aren't real. Testers think for themselves. They have brains, right? So we really want to be thinking about it. Because if, we keep those things to fantasy land, then we're missing reality, right? We know that job ads ask for programming skills. But is it really what they want? They ask for it, but is that what they want? Is automation that thing that's going to solve all problems? If we can code, can we solve every problem in the world? Right? I want people to think about that because we don't live in the land of unicorns. We live in reality. So I would like us to bring that into our reality, right? Let's have unicorns and dragons and think of the impossible and bring it into our teams. Much more fun, right? Let's think about that. So if we think about the skills that we have on our teams, right? We have, our programmers have programming skills, I would hope, right? They know how to code. Otherwise we wouldn't hire them, right? They know how to code. But they also know how to test. When programmers tell me they don't know how to test, I kind of want to say, well, bye. See you around. Because every programmer should know how to test. They at least test and do your unit testing, right? Especially on agile teams, because you have to do your unit testing. You have to do your automated unit testing. So they know how to test. They know how to debug. Now, testers have a different set of skills. Their depth. What is their strength? That depth is your strength. It's what you feel passionate about. It's what you pick up and read. So if you go over to this library over here, which books appeal to you? Is it the testing book, the agile testing book that's not there, right? Or is it that clean coder book? Which one do you go for, right? So you want to think about that. What is your passion? What are you going to learn more about? And so that's usually your depth. Your breadth is what you're going to know a little bit about, right? Programmers know a little bit of testing. So testers, they may have, their strength is exploratory testing. Perhaps I'm a really good exploratory tester. But to support my team, I might have to learn a little bit about performance testing or security testing. It's not my strength. It's not my passion, but I have to know a little bit about it. I also have to learn a little bit more about other things too. What makes you a good agile person? A generalized specialist, that's the word I want. So I'm a specialist in something, but I have also some other skills that help. So if we look at a team, right, an agile team. So Robert Lambert and Adam Knight talk about the idea of a square-shaped team. So if we think about T-shaped skills, right, we each individual is T-shaped. What are we doing? But if we look at our team and say, what kind of skills do we need to fill it out, right? So perhaps our T is, here, but we're missing something else. So we want to hire somebody else with a different depth, right? So if we look at the team as a whole, what skills are we missing? We probably have lots of coding skills already. So why do we think we need to hire more? Why do we think we have to hire a tester with coding skills? We have a team full of it. Maybe we were missing some of the other things, right? Testing is definitely a team problem, right? It's not a tester's problem because a lot of the testing is done by programmers. Some of the testing is done by product owners, acceptance testing, right? They're doing their acceptance testing. Okay, this is just weird. I might just change. Is that okay? Try this one. Feedback, is that okay? I didn't like that feedback. This is much better for me. Is it better for you guys? Yeah. Okay, excellent, thanks. But tests, when we use them, they're a team way of thinking, because we can use tests. No, it's not helping. The desired behavior. I think that when I'm moving in front of a speaker or something, maybe. If we show the desired behavior using tests, that gives us information, right? Tests help us to look beyond the little line of code, but look beyond and looking at how does it affect other things depending on what we're trying to do. So we want tests, but we want them to be showing us the way. We want the whole team to be looking at it. So when we look at that team and that square-shaped team, we're looking at the different skills. Skills you bring, skills you bring. We bring different skills. Now, this is a picture that my granddaughter colored for me. This is a few years ago. And she brought it to me, and the first thing I did is I looked at this, and I'm like, lovely dragon. And I wanted to say, but you made a mistake. I think she was about 8 years old when she colored this. And I went, I think you made a mistake, sweetie. I didn't say that, though. I just said, tell me about your dragon. Tell me about this. And I said, so why did you choose to color this blue? Because I kind of was thinking that it was part of the same dragon. And she said, well, no, it's got a flowing mane, and this is the sky in between. And I went, huh, a new perspective. I never even thought of that. That's what people and testers will do, is bring a different perspective. If everybody thinks the same way, we are never going to see something a little bit different. And that's what she showed me, was that there's more than one way to look at something. So you want to be very careful about keeping your team with all the same skills. Testers can bring a different mindset. They can bring something different. Now, when we start thinking about the skills that a tester can bring, well, thinking skills, right? There's a lot of thinking skills that we can think about. So these are some examples, collaboration. Hopefully the whole team knows how to collaborate. But eliciting examples, asking questions. So QA, you know what QA stands for? Quality assurance, is that what you said? Yeah, but see, I don't think we can assure quality because we want to build quality in. So I think the idea of quality assurance is flawed. But I do think QA stands for something very important, a skill that really good testers know how to do. They are question askers. So if we start thinking of QA standing for question askers, the next time your testers start asking all those questions, well, what if we happen to do this? What if we go, thank you for asking those questions. I never thought of that, right? That's what they do. But they also have to be good problem solvers, because a good tester does not only find maybe defects, they will do a little bit of problem solving and hopefully come and say, hey, here's a bug I found, I think. Can I show you? I think it might be here, and this might be what causes it. So being able to do problem solving is a good thing, right? That critical thinking skills, really important. That's where we start asking those what if questions. That's what is going to make the difference between putting out a product that is okay and putting out a product that your customers love, because no matter what they do, it works, right? So you want to be thinking about those sorts of things. The other thing that a good tester does is gives and receives information. Feedback, right? They give feedback in the form of bugs, possibly. They receive feedback by listening. So I give you a bug, I say, I think I have a bug, and you go, well, it's that we have a conversation. Being able to give feedback is really important. So what do you think would happen if I had a bug, if I found a bug in the software, and I went up to my programmer, I'm just picking on you because you guys are on this side, and I went up to my programmer and said, hey, look what I found. I found this bug, and it's a really bad bug. Why did you do this? This is such an ugly bug. It's like calling your baby ugly. Right? What do you think that programmer is going to do? That programmer is just going to say, I'll get to it someday, right? Whereas if I went and said, I think I found this bug, and it might be here because it looks like the programmer will likely actually sit down with me, and we can look at it together, we can pair, we can find that bug and squash it and fix it, right? How do you give feedback? How do you receive feedback? Very, very important. So one of my, so I'll tell you a little story. When I first started, well, many, many years ago, and I didn't like public speaking. In fact, at my daughter's wedding, when I was supposed to give the welcome speech to my son-in-law, I couldn't do it. I had to give my speech to my husband to read. I couldn't do it. I couldn't talk. So I took Toastmasters, right? And what it did was give me skills to be able to public speak. I still don't like it. I still get nervous. My knees shake. It still happens. But I've got skills to be able to do that. But one of the other things that came out of it was we have to give evaluations to other people, right? They speak. That is giving feedback. But you also learn to take feedback. And I think that's very, very important for testers and a skill that can be developed, right? We're going to do a little exercise here. All right? So what I want you to do is find a pair. So somebody's sitting beside you. If you can't find pairs, you can do it in threes. I'm going to show a picture on here. And so one of the pair is going to have their backs to the screen, and one person's going to look at the screen, and they're going to describe what they see. Okay? So you only have a couple of minutes to be able to do that. So first off, find a pair. And one person turn away from the screen. Okay, you guys out in the hallway, you want to come in because you have to see the screen over here if you want to play. Has everybody got a pair? And one person facing away from the screen looking at the back? Stand up. Okay, you don't have to stand up, but make sure that you're facing away from the screen. I don't see everybody pairs facing away. This is called self-organizing, by the way. You should be really good at it. Everybody ready? Is there anybody that doesn't have a pair? Who doesn't have a pair? So you can do it in triplet. One person describes to two people. One person describes to two people. Okay, you ready? Okay, and then when I say stop, you can turn around. But right now, ready? Facing away? All right, I'll give you about 2 minutes. Start describing. Quiet for a minute. So how many people had a perfect image in their mind from the description? Anybody? Pretty close? Okay? So a few. So what were some of the discrepancies that your images versus the reality, the descriptions? Pardon? The doors and windows, where they were located? Pardon? The roof line? Okay. Anything else? Come on, I heard lots of laughing. What was different? So, do you even have a word to describe this? What word do you use to describe this piece of the house?
The side of the house.
The side of the house? Do you use the word porch? Do you know what a porch is? Yeah, so sometimes you might not even have that word because maybe you don't have porches, I don't know, right? Skylights, maybe there's just different words that you can. I know I did this in Europe one time, and I think the biggest discrepancy was one of the people were from the US, describing to somebody in Europe. So they said, on the second floor, which to me, this is the second floor, but in Europe, that's a third, this is the second, like this is ground zero, that's ground one. So when they said second floor, they pictured a huge big house, right? The words we use to describe things mean different things to different people, right? So when you're describing with words, right? When you're asking questions, you're receiving feedback, you're giving feedback, you have to ask lots of clarifying questions to try to figure it out, right? Did that help a lot, asking the questions?
Yeah.
Because some people did. I saw some people doing things like waving flags, showing peaks, like using their hands. Would it have been easier to draw a picture? Probably, right? So how we describe things, how we listen, how we hear them might be different. So giving and receiving feedback tends to be a very critical skill, actually. And I lost my clicker. So just thinking about something as simple as a house that we all should know, but it might be a little bit different than the type of house you use, so the words aren't there. Anybody can tell me where this is taken? What country is this from? Can you tell? Not Louisiana. Where? Any idea what this flag is?
Yes.
Yes. It's a Canadian flag. Yeah. The red maple leaf, right? It's actually from eastern Canada, the Maritimes. That's where that's from. Prince Edward Island. All right. Geography lesson for the day. When we start to describe things, when your product owner starts to describe things, use examples, right? So you may have been able to describe the house to say, hey, you know the house that's around the corner that looks like this? Well, it's kind of like that, but it's different. You can use existing examples. You can draw pictures. But thinking about examples will help you describe, help you give feedback. So you want to be thinking about that. So those are some of the thinking skills. Let's kind of move into some of the technical skills. So a term that a friend of mine used several years ago was technical awareness. And I really liked that term because it captured what I was thinking testers need. They need technical awareness. What that means will be different for every team, but technical awareness is really important. So let's kind of talk a little bit about what that means. The skills we have, what we want those technical skills is because we want to collaborate with the rest of the team. If I don't necessarily have to know how to code to be able to talk to programmers, but maybe I should know some basic constructs of the programming language. Maybe I can know a few things like, what do we mean when we say parameters? What does a loop mean? What does, right? Just certain things so that when they're talking, you understand what the risks might be. So basic constructs will let you talk to programmers and understand some of their ideas. So really that's what we want from a programming point of view, right? But it also means learning. If you don't have any of those kind of technical skills and you might want them, what is it you need to learn, right? So automation framework, the testing framework. You should understand that a little bit. Do I need to know details? Maybe, maybe not. But I better know the language that we're using, the domain-specific language, so that I can describe my tests in that language. I better understand what a testing method means, or input parameters, how to express an expected result, right? I think the testers should know enough about the programming language that the programmers are coding in to be able to maybe read and understand it. Reading and understanding is a whole lot different than writing, because I can pair with a programmer, and if he walks me through their code, if I can understand what he's saying, I can help review, for example. If I can read unit tests, I can sit with them and pair and say, hey, did you think about these other unit tests? Writing code is a completely different thing to do. Now, I might want to be able to write a little bit of code in Ruby or Python or something, because that would help me do my job easier. But that might be a long cry from writing production code, right? I also think that even looking at the domain, that's a type of technical skill. I shouldn't say never, I have walked into only one company as a tester and understood their domain first day. And that was an airline company, and I was working on their web check-in. I know that really well because I spend a lot of time on airplanes, right? I know how to do that. That is the only company I have ever been to where I went in and I thought, I know this. Every other company, I've had to learn the domain. Brought testing skills, but I had to learn the domain. And so you need to pick that up. You have to be thinking about it, right? So if we go back to some of the more technical kind of programming skills, right? Maybe we pick up a book, Everyday Scripting with Ruby. We download Ruby. We walk through Brian's examples. We learn a little bit, right? I noticed that there's acceptance test-driven development by example by Marcus Gardner on there, right? You can download an ebook. I forget what language he actually uses in that. Do you know what it is? Doesn't matter. But you can do that and you can work through his examples as well, right? Cucumber and cheese. Cheesy does a pretty good job using examples on there. You can start working through some of the things. Even design patterns, right? Programmers have design patterns from programming, but there are test patterns as well. So understanding some of those kind of technical things, right? So for example, ports and adapters, right? Thinking about what events come in and what triggers the messages. That's a test pattern. Page object pattern is an automation test pattern. You can learn these things. These are technical skills that will help you think about how you test. How do we help automate, right? There's a lot of skills out there that we can learn without actually coding. Something else that I encourage testers to do, and I find that there's not a lot to do, is your programmer's IDE, right? Doesn't matter what they use. Get a copy on your machine. Get familiar with it. Use it. Because if you look at it and you know how it works, then when you go to pair with that programmer, you don't get all scared by all the stuff that's on the screen. You can look at it and you can see what they're doing, right? It's not magic. It's just getting used to a different environment. So use the same tools as your teammates. It makes a huge difference. Anybody here do acceptance test-driven development or behavioral-driven development or specification by example? So there's some nods, right? Learning what that means, learning the process, perhaps learning the tools that go with it is something that you want to do. So this is where I think testers add a tremendous amount of value, right? You have your feature. This is the business capability that your product owner comes and says, we need to build this for our customers, right? You take that, you divide it up, and you slice it into stories. Hopefully the whole team is involved in that. You take those stories and you start talking about those stories. So the discussion, the exploring the examples, the defining those high-level acceptance tests. These are things that testers can do very well and be very helpful with. thinking about all of the what if kind of things. So getting examples of what happens if we do that, right? Programmers tend, they don't have to, but they tend to think of implementation, and they're thinking about the happy path, right? What do we have to do to make it work? That's what they want. Testers with their critical thinking skills keep asking all of these other questions, and it makes for better stories, it makes for better products, right? So this is something that testers can be very good at and very helpful at. And then, those high-level acceptance tests and those examples, they're guiding the actual coding and testing and automating. This is where all the magic happens, right? And because you spit out the other side and you got code, you got your automation, you got your tests, and it's working beautifully. Now, if we start to think about defects or bugs, whatever you want to call them, when we're asking questions at these early stages, right? When we're asking questions, when we're discussing the stories, having those conversations, we are preventing defects because we're getting shared understanding. It's really easy to go off and just go coding, just jump into the coding. If you stop and ask those questions, you're actually preventing defects. Once this code is written, then we're finding defects, right? So we code, everything's all good, we've done our exploratory testing, and your product owner says, all is good, we accept, right? That's what we want. So this is where getting testers involved early in asking those questions makes a huge difference. So we want to be thinking about these. These are technical skills that you need to be able to do that. You need to be able to understand, right? This is just an example, right? This is no coding in it. This is a high-level acceptance test written in a BDD format, given a user as, this was a login kind of story. Given a user has no existing account, when I request to create an account, I enter a valid username, give an example, valid password, give an example. As a tester, I haven't done any coding. But I compare with a programmer to say, hey, just create a new account. Maybe that's our test method. What would it take? What would that look like? It would take maybe 2 parameters, username, password. What would the expected result look like? So we want to be thinking about that and be able to have that conversation. I haven't written a line of code as a tester, but I can help define those tests. Right? So that's thinking skills, technical skills, and then there's these testing skills. We had a conversation today about what testing skills were, right? And it was kind of interesting because sometimes people don't think about what testing skills are. So exploratory testing, right? There's lots of different ways to do exploratory testing. Exploratory testing is something you would do after the code is finished. We're trying to explore. We have a charter or a mission that we want to try to see. What didn't we think about? Because we thought about all of those other tests early. We've given them to the programmer. So they've coded, they've given us code, no bugs, they've all been fixed. So we want to explore. So there's different ways. We can do it as personas, like put on a customer hat, very specific customer hat. We can do risks. What are some of the risks? Gee, when I was talking to the programmer, he was telling me about that he had a hard time doing this. That would be a risk I'd want to think about, and I would explore. Most of the time I see exploratory testing around workflows and journeys, right? That seems to be where people want to gravitate. But there's lots of other different ways. Tours is a different way of thinking about it. I think that tours is a great way of and if you want to read lots, just Google exploratory testing tours. There's lots out there. But it's a way of thinking about your application in a different way. So if I was a tourist coming to KL, what are 3 things I must see here?
Twin Towers.
The towers. Come on. Be proud of your city. Come on, what else should I see?
Batu Caves.
Okay. Number 3. How about this museum behind us over here? Right? When I ask people that in Calgary, where I'm from, people go, Banff. It's in the mountains. It's a city an hour and a half away from Calgary. I go, that's not in Calgary. That's, whatever. Anyhow, sometimes we can't think of things in our own city what tourists should see. But in your application, what are 3 things that must work? Right? That's a landmark tour. Define a tour around that in different ways. Perhaps as somebody who comes in and has to do everything very quickly, or maybe as a tour guide who is looking at some of the extra things around, like hotels or something. Different ways of looking at your application. So exploratory testing is a skill that can be learned. Not only do you have to be able to explore, but you also have to be able to articulate. What did I see? What did I test? What did I find? What are the defects? What are the risks if we don't fix this defect? Being able to articulate, being able to communicate those risks is a skill, right? It's a testing skill. And then there's lots of tools in our toolbox. So 5 Whys is a root cause analysis kind of tool, right? Using models like the agile testing quadrants, which I won't go into. We talked about acceptance test-driven development, brainstorming techniques on tests we want to do, estimating, using heuristics, mind mapping, using the Thank you. See, yes. Didn't I say today that sometimes I meet people from other countries that English is better than mine? Yeah. Some of the quality tools, like root cause analysis tools, there's a whole lot of the different ones, right? Test design techniques, because there are techniques to create tests. Just things like time management, tool evaluations, and what else do I have? Yeah. So there's lots of things that you have to do. Testers add unique value. I firmly and absolutely believe that, right? There's specialties like security, performance, user experience testing. Things like if you were working in a business intelligence or data warehousing, you have to have special skills to be able to understand how to run scripts, to be able to compare databases and look at data quality. Specialized skills depending on the market you're in, depending on what you're trying to do. Even things like those eliciting examples, those asking questions. Those are skills that have to be learned. They do. Now, if we look at it in our unicorn land, right? That testing awareness, or that technical awareness, we cannot be without it anymore. I don't think you have to know how to code. If you do code, it's a plus, by the way. Don't unlearn your coding skills if you have it. Use them. It's a plus. But I don't think you have to know how to code, production code. But you cannot get away by being a zombie tester anymore. You have to be having some of those technical skills. And you have to be able to think about different ways to use those. How can I contribute to add value to the team? My value is no longer just testing the product. My value is now in testing ideas as well, testing assumptions, trying to prevent defects. So we want to be thinking about how can we help deliver software. It's a mindset change, right? So having those specialized testing skills is great value. Being able to ask those questions. I think that I put in the slide deck, and I added it today, was the sense of creativity. Because I think you have to have that to be able to think outside the box, to be able to think of different scenarios. I think you have to be a little bit creative. But the characteristic, and it's not a skill, it's a characteristic that I think I value more than anything else, is the idea of curiosity. Because if you're curious, you will read, you will learn, and you will grow, right? So that sense of curiosity is actually easy to see in people, right? Even in an interview, if you're interviewing somebody, and you sit during that interview, and you're interviewing for a tester, and you're asking them all that questions, you're asking them questions, and at the end of the interview, you go, do you have any questions for me? And if they haven't even asked one question, it's probably not somebody you want as a tester. Right? They have shown no curiosity. Or I can give them the benefit of the doubt, but if they are that shy that they can't ask a question, how are they ever going to raise a question to a developer or a product owner? Right? Testers have to be able to use their voice. They have to be able to ask those questions. They have to sometimes be courageous, right? They have to be able to speak out. And I think those are some of the things that we miss if we're not reaching a little bit further than we can. So I'm going to just kind of leave this with you now. Yeah. I encourage you guys, especially testers in the room, be curious, be passionate about what you do. Programmers in the room, please be patient and listen to those questions, right? Product owners, managers, answer those questions, because it will just make for a better product, right? You really want to be doing that. So be curious. Keep learning, keep asking questions, okay? And experiment. So Agile has this idea of fail fast, right? Fail fast, learn fast, right? So think about all the different ways you can learn, right? Can you learn from each other? Really try to figure it out and find the wonder. All right, just keep going and keep learning. And the rest of this, that's my contact information. Twitter ID is Janet Gregory CA. Email, I like getting emails. I love getting emails. Say, hey Janet, where can I find this? Please do, I like getting emails. So Janet at agiletester.ca. And the rest of this is just links. I'll leave this up for a little bit. Links for all kinds of things. Some of the things I mentioned today, but other things too. So I'll open it up for questions, if there's any questions.
Question over here.
Should developers be writing tests?
Should developers write tests? Their unit tests? Absolutely, for sure. Developers own their unit tests. They should be writing their unit tests. Are you talking about other tests, like functional type tests?
Tests it's like a broad term to me. So,
It's a very broad term.
so I'm not sure which context are we in when this.
Writing tests? We can be in any context, actually. So unit tests, developers own, they should be writing their own unit tests. If we're talking about functional tests, so tests that I would need to get my story complete from a functionality perspective. If a team does not have testers on it, definitely the programmers should be writing those tests, probably working with their product owner. If you have a tester on the team, then work with the tester because they'll write those tests usually, right?
What about TDD?
TDD?
Yeah.
So TDD, test-driven development, is about writing unit tests, right? I write a little tiny unit test. I write, and if I run it, it fails because there's no code. And then I write my code and my test passes, right? Red, green, refactor. It's about unit tests. When I was talking about acceptance test-driven development, think about it as stepping back. So unit tests are about little tiny chunks of code. Acceptance test-driven development is about the business rules, talking about business functionality. So we're driving it from the business. So inside, yeah, I've got my virtual whiteboard. My husband laughs at me because I cannot talk and describe things without drawing it. So I have a virtual whiteboard. So if we think about TDD, unit testing, as the center, and we think about the functional tests as a bigger circle, and we're kind of going in. So we start on the outside and go in until we write the little TDD tests, the unit tests. So we're driving it from the business perspective. So they're different levels. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What about integration tests? Is it?
So we had a conversation today about integration tests. What did I say about integration tests?
So
It's a test.
it's a test. So what I learned today was, when we talk about development, we talk about integration tests, and what Janet says was, be more specific. What kind of integration test? And then that kind of triggered a lot of thinking in my mind. Like, yeah, you're right, because what do you integrate to? From what to what? And then the more specific you are, it actually kind of informs how you want to test those items.
So who owns it?
The team.
team.
Testing is a team problem. The team owns all testing.
So just add one thing. I'm a manager type, right? So if it breaks, I'm not gonna go, who owns it? You all own it, right? It's a dev team.
So maybe I rephrase my question a little bit. Who should be writing integration tests? Tester or developers?
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Whoever has the time, right? So if my tester is a bottleneck and I only have one tester on my team and they're so far behind, I'm really hoping that the rest of the team steps up and helps me, right? Testing is a team problem. So, and that's where if we stand and I make a little square around myself and I say, I am a tester and I am not doing anything else. I am a programmer and I'm not doing anything else but programming. You will not have a very good collaborative team. So stepping over those lines a little bit really helps. So testers can help the programmers by suggesting other unit tests. Programmers can help the testers if they need help doing things. There'll be collaboration. Nobody should be doing it in isolation, right?
Just curious, what's your background?
Developer.
Developer?
Yeah.
So Jan, just based on what you just said right now, so if developers have to do testing when the testing team is out or the tester is out, do we need to train them as well?
Yeah, so, yes. And so, remember the T-shape? Yes. Programmers should learn a little bit about testing because what happens if the tester goes on holidays? Right? And are you going to stand still? No. It's got to carry on. So, sharing and learning. My grandson has this saying, and it just keeps popping up in my head all the time. Sharing is caring, right? And so sharing from a programmer perspective, sharing and learning, teaching the testers a little bit about the code is a good thing. Testers, teaching programmers a little bit about testing is a good thing. Share the goodness. Share your expertise. It's a good thing, right? You will never be, a programmer will likely, so I shouldn't say that. I'm an ex-programmer. I saw the light. I happen to find testing much more interesting There is so many more things I can do, testing and grow. Programmer is, I was just doing the same thing again and again and again, right? It's kind of boring. So I'm trying to get programmers to see the light.
I would like to ask about automation framework, because wherever we were to hire QA, we ask for that technical skills. We are expecting them to be able to come up with automation framework. So and it's
So you ask them that they need to know this automated framework, right? What are the chances that they know that automation framework? 0. So you have just taken, by asking them that they know how to do this, is you've just taken, instead of looking at 100 testers, which you might get 20 really good ones, you've just narrowed it down to 2. And they might be really bad testers, but they know the framework, right? So when you ask for something very specific like that, you're going to get something very specific, and you've just eliminated possibly a whole lot of really good testers that could learn that framework, right? When I took programming in university, one of the things that they told me was that you learn these languages. So I learned this, and I learned about 5 different languages in university. My first job wasn't in a language that I had learned at all. You know those basic constructs, you will learn the new language. The same goes for things like frameworks, right? If that tester has some basic understanding, they will learn the new framework. So be careful what you ask for. Right? Yes?
In an agile team, is there any recommended ratio of number of developers and
We answered that one today. Somebody want to help with that one? There is no magic number. There really isn't, right? I have seen very successful teams that have 0 testers on them. But the programmers really bought in to learning how to test. And they did awesome jobs. But I've also seen, my very first agile team, I was the only tester to 10 to 12 programmers. So I became a test consultant. But what we were working on was a message handling system. So there wasn't a lot of business logic, right? So it helped, right? I find that as soon as you have a lot of business logic, like banking, trading systems, anything like that, you probably need more testers, and you'll have a higher ratio just because there's so many business rules and impacts to different parts of the system that you will find you do. But there is no magic number. I say, try one. If the tester can't keep up, if the team's not keeping up, get another one, right? If you can't find another one, then programmers, step up. It's as simple as that.
What is your advice to QAs who has been working as QAs for many years as manual tester, enjoy their work but really struggling to learn programming, but the market is dictating that they need to become programmers?
Right. So if you've been one of those traditional testers and doing a manual kind of following scripts and things, so do some, so I just got a note today. Somebody said, we're going to do some weekend testing in September 29th, I said, or something, right? So there's this thing called weekend testers. You can join in, it's on your free time, but you learn from other testers. You can pair with testers, but you do it on your own time. They choose a product, and they work together, so you get to work with other testers, and you learn lots. That's a very practical way, right? Learning, picking up a book like Elizabeth Hendrickson's Explore It, right? Great book on exploratory testing. And then try it. Sit there and look at it and go, hey, I want to try this skill. And I'm going to take something and I'm going to try and see what happens. The best way to find out whether or not you're kind of on the right track is go find a mentor, another person who you trust, and say, this is what I was thinking, this is how I was doing, what do you think? And ask for feedback from people, right? Pick up a book like Brian Merrick's Everyday Scripting with Ruby. Ruby's free, you can download it, you can try it, you can walk through his examples. Those are things that people can do on their own to develop some of the skills. Absolutely can, right? Other questions? Yes.
In agile environment, how important are test cases? Because test cases are eventually die out of.
How important are test cases? So I don't even use that word anymore. Because what a test case means to you means way different to her or to her. So I use the term tests, because that can mean lots of things. Tests don't die out. Tests, especially if I automate them, become my specifications. They're the one, it's my documentation. It tells me what my system does. Manual test scripts are out of date the minute you write them.
What are alternative of that in agile?
Pardon? Can you say that again?
What is the alternative of manual scripts?
Alternative of manual scripts? Well, the way I look at it is I want my regression suite to be automated so that I can run it again and again and again every day. Anything that's not automated, I'm probably going to go do as an exploratory test, right? And have charters for them. But if I don't have automation, I am going to be thinking about what is the simplest way I can document those tests. So I've seen people be very inventive using mind maps. Do you know what a mind map is, right? So I start and then I, perhaps I'm thinking of, I don't know, testing Twitter, right? So I'm going to test retweets. So Twitter's my center, and I'm going to test retweets. Can I retweet? Can I add a quote? And then I'll just keep going out and out until my final leaf on the mind map is my actual test. All of a sudden I can see all my tests, my variations, on one nice piece of paper, or mind map, right? And it's very visible. I can even color it and check it green if I've passed them, right? What are my variations? And it makes it a very nice way. That makes it simple. I like people to think, how can we do it simple to keep it up to date if I don't have automation? Sometimes you have to be very inventive.
Jen,
Yes.
on automation, I had a question, like when you go from sprint to sprint, based on your experience, how do you find it? Do you do automation for the stories in the same sprint, or do you do the next sprint?
Always in the same sprint. So have you heard of the automation pyramid, the test automation pyramid? I really need a whiteboard. You took them all out of here. They took them out of here to make room. I had 5 of them in here today. So the pyramid is, it just says the base of the pyramid is my unit testing. So that's the beginning of my regression suite, fast feedback. The middle layer is testing at the API layer, under the user interface, right? That's where I want to automate for each and every story. So when I have a story, part of that story will have a task that says automate. So the story will not be done until I've done my tests at the automated level, at the API level. The top of it is tests through the user interface, workflow tests, things like that. Those tests are what I will do at the feature. So feature has many stories, right? So at the feature level, because the GUI is, the user interface is finished and complete only when you're finished your feature. Otherwise it's changing. So there's no point in trying to automate earlier than that, the workflows through the user interface, right? So automate at the API level, at the story level, and keep it with each and every story. A story is not done until it's automated.
Yeah, I just posted a link to the test pyramid on the Facebook group for your reference.
There you go. And on our website, agiletester.ca, chapter 8 is actually on there, and it talks about the agile testing quadrants, but it also has a little bit about the pyramid as well, so you can download that.
Okay, we'll share that as well. That's good. Okay,
Yeah.
we'll send a link across.
Either or, doesn't matter. Other questions?
All right. So
Okay,
it's a wrap.
it's a wrap.
Oh, one more right here.
Oh.
One more right here.
Oh, at the back. Yes.
Oh, 2 more then.
For
get
example,
you.
if we test for a new feature, and then after the time, for some time after the release and everything, we realized like we did not gather some scenarios. So is it because of
number of cases, there could be a number of reasons. Sometimes it is just lack of experience, we didn't know, which is why I like to have customer or somebody who understands on working with our teams. So sometimes that's the reason. Sometimes it is a lack of taking time to plan. We just get in and start doing. We don't stop to say, hey, what are the scenarios? What are the extra things? And I find that if you take that little bit extra time at the beginning, it really is worthwhile and makes all the difference. So having that conversation, making those scenarios visible and makes a world of difference. So some of the best questions that a tester can ask to a product owner, especially to get those alternative scenarios, is, what's the worst thing that can happen? It's very telling sometimes, right? What's the best thing that can happen? Those are easy questions, and you might be surprised at what you get to answer, because you're making them think.
Okay, we got one more question right here.
Hi, Jim. My team actually, we are starting to look into BDD, but what's your advice for a team who started to look into BDD? We are coming from, we are actually, our background is manual testing, and then we are very traditional type of recording down our test cases, but now we are moving to BDD.
Okay, so when you're starting BDD, forget the tool. Don't pull the tool in immediately, right? Work out the process first. So one of the things, Lisa, my co-author, one of the things they did with their team is they made a little rule. They said that the programmers, and it was the team that made the rule, not the testers, it was the team. They said the programmers would not start coding until they had all the tests. So what it did was it forced the team to start thinking about the tests first, right? And that's what you want to start doing, is start thinking about what tests would I write, and then think about, don't write them in test cases that you would traditionally do, because you don't know that you're going to click on this button, do this, do that. You don't have that information. What is the result you're trying to do? I am trying to save that information. I am trying to log in. I am trying to whatever, right? So start thinking about the examples, the scenarios perhaps, and start from there and start putting those into tests about what am I trying to do, not how. And it forces your thinking into a different mindset. It's kind of like when we're talking about TDD, writing the test first before the code. How can you write those tests early? So take out all of the click here, click there, the steps, and focus on the results. What are we trying to do here? And it takes practice, right? And start working with the programmers and say, all right, these are the tests. What do you think of these tests? Did we miss any, right? And give your tests to the programmers, have the discussion. You'd be surprised at what comes out of that. Yeah.
But how you mentioned that we don't go into more details like a click here and there, right?
Yeah,
so,
stay out of that.
We have the given, when, then,
but don't put a click in there. So when I see given I am on this page, when I click here, don't do that. Because as soon as you say click or anything else, you're starting to tell the programmers how to code. Don't want to do that. What is the result? So when you see yourself doing that, grab it out. Say, oh, what do I really want?
So what do you advise if we already go into this situation?
Stop it. Stop it.
How do you pull out
I'm going to say, talk with your team and say, hey, look at Janet said, and that's okay, you can do that. Just say, we're doing this, we shouldn't be doing this. How can we stop? So you make little rules and you go, if you see this, stop me. And just stop doing that. Start pulling those out and looking at it and going, how could I rewrite this? So I'm saying the result without saying the how, right? And if you pair with people and you start, that's the best way, is to pair and say, all right, let's just make sure, let's try this again. Oh, that still didn't work, let's try it again.
right? It's just practice. But stop yourself when you see it happening, because you get in a bad habit.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Programmers don't like it when you tell them how to code either. They get kind of irate. What makes you think you know better than me? And I think if we say, click the save button, we've eliminated all kinds of possibilities that we never even thought about, right? Sometimes they're bad possibilities, but you can solve that later. All right, any other questions? Thank you very much. You've been a great crowd.